Now, in high definition, coverage you can count on. This is WTVM News Leader 9.
Devastation from deadly tornadoes.
It was just debris. There was just cars beat up. My mom was flipping out about her car.
A storm tears through 17 miles of land, flattening a school, homes, knocking out power, and killing at least 24 people, including children. Tonight, we learn about the heroes and the heartache as the town begins to dig, rebuild, and regain strength.
It's starting to set in. It's just a total loss. Everything's gone. We're finding clothes, so we'll be good for a few days.
Our prayers and our thoughts are with the Oklahoma families that have been hit hard by this terrible storm these last 2 days.
The powerful tornado that slammed central Oklahoma Monday is now being upgraded to an EF5 tornado, according to the National Weather Service. Several hundred volunteers are on the ground now surveying the damage. Here's a live look. And looking for the wounded. Governor Mary Fallin of Oklahoma has been in talks with President Obama, who is sending federal assistance to help in the aftermath of the destruction. The numbers continue to change since this deadly tornado touched down yesterday afternoon. At least 24 people were killed, including children. The death toll had originally been 51 and then increased to 91. But authorities say that was likely caused by double counting the victims. According to officials, more than 200 people were injured. At least 60 of them are children. Good evening and welcome to coverage you can count on at 5:30. I'm Cheryl Renee. Thanks so much for joining us. To understand more on the path of this deadly tornado,
Cheryl, thanks so much. To give you a better idea of where we're talking about, Oklahoma right here, this is Oklahoma City, and Moore, Oklahoma is actually a suburb just south of the city, right there along Interstate 35. Now, the tornado itself took a path pretty similar to a tornado back on May 3rd, 1999, also rated an EF5 and also a very big event for those folks. So just 14 years ago, they dealt with something very, very similar. The same kind of destruction, the same kind of destructive power from one of those EF5 tornadoes. Now, right now, there's severe weather ongoing across parts of the nation as we speak. The good news is most of it has passed well east of Oklahoma City and more, so they can have some nice weather to clean up. But numerous tornado watches are in effect for parts of Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and also parts of Texas. Some strong storms moving through the Dallas-Fort Worth area right now. And it's been this kind of persistent pattern that's caused the showers and storms and the severe weather events over the last few days out there. Now, as far as our weather, it looks pretty good. We'll be talking more about that and have your full forecast coming up a little bit later in the show. Cheryl?
All right. Thanks so much, Derek. The residents of Moore, Oklahoma try to recover and clean up today, a day after a monster tornado flattened much of their town. ABC's Marcy Gonzalez is in Moore with the story.
Debris waves in the trees like a white flag of surrender. This small community of Moore, Oklahoma, nearly flattened by a tornado of unthinkable size and power.
It was really scary. I thought I was going to die there for a while. I just, laid in there and on the ground and held my dog close to me and just waited to see what was going to happen.
As the skies darkened and hail began to fall, students at Briarwood Elementary School huddled in hallways and bathrooms.
I had to tell them this is not a drill and we need to be safe, and just laying my body on top of as many kids as I could.
All of the children at Briarwood survived, but just 5 miles away at Plaza Towers Elementary, a more dire scene. Only a sole blackboard sticking out from the rubble. Officials say at least 7 children died there, and many more are still missing. The storm that tore apart families ripped homes to shreds. Debbie Guidry, her husband and a neighbor heard the sirens and took shelter here in their cellar, emerging after to find this.
This is our garage here. That where the fireplace is was our living room.
Was all that was left behind.
It's just a house. It was my house for 31 years, but it's just a house. And we got to come out together, and that's what's most important.
A family, a community together through yet another dark day.
And many of the residents here saying they got through that huge, deadly tornado that hit this area in 1999. They will get through this. President Obama has already promised federal aid money to help, and the director of FEMA is already here. Marcy Gonzalez, ABC News, Moore, Oklahoma.
The devastation you see on the television may leave some children worried or confused about the images they are seeing. And sometimes as parents, you may not know just what is the right thing to say or do. Joining us now is Dr. Kevin Weiss with Columbus Psychological Associates to talk about the best way to handle the situation. And thank you so much for being here, Doctor.
Thanks for having me.
You're so very welcome. So depending on the age of the child, what's the best way to talk to your kids about what they're seeing?
Well, I think you need to be honest. I think a lot of people get so anxious themselves that they're afraid to talk to their children. I think you need to be honest with them and tell them what happened. But I do think it needs to be tapered to kind of fit their vocabulary level and their capability to understand the situation.
Okay. So do you wait for them to come to you, or do you go to them proactively?
Well, I typically, on more family dynamic stuff, I would tend to wait for them to come to me. But on these kind of traumatic situations, they're going to hear about it at school. They're going to hear about it from their friends. They're going to hear from misinformation. So I absolutely would take the heads up. I would take the lead and talk to them about it.
Okay. What level of detail should you talk to them about?
Well, there's a very simple answer to that question, and lots of people do a lot of internet searches to find out what's appropriate and within their vocabulary. And I think the easiest way is to lay out what happened, and let them ask questions. If they're asking questions, you need to tailor your answers to meet their questions. So you only need to give them as much information. If you answer the question very tentatively, then what's going to happen is they're going to ask another question. And if they ask another question, then you can go a little bit further, because that really will reveal what they understand. Lots of times what happens is kids say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to ask any more questions.
Right.
And then they can walk away. But I really want my kids to get the information from me, not from anybody else.
From anybody else. Now, what do you do in a situation where you have children that have very different ages? You have a small child, but you have an older child. Do you talk to them together or separately?
Well, I think that if you're going to speak to them in a group, you need to tailor the conversation to the smaller child.
Right. Okay.
And then have a separate conversation with the older child.
Okay, great information. Should you limit their TV viewing around this time?
I think you should. I think that seeing the disaster can produce, disaster sites can produce a lot of anxiety, and I think that if they don't see that and they just hear your kind of view on it, I think it's easier for them to process.
Okay, great information. Thank you so much, Dr. Weiss, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Well, winds of more than 200 miles per hour ripped through the roof off of an elementary school in Oklahoma, exposing students to the fury of an EF5 tornado. Many lives have been lost, and rescue workers continue to search for survivors. It's a scene many in East Alabama may remember, as just 2 years ago an EF4 tornado leveled neighborhoods and schools. Legislators passed a law that requires new school buildings to have safe rooms. Here in the Chattahoochee Valley, Troy State University officials at the Phoenix City campus say they are preparing the new Riverfront campus to withstand those types of storms.
Any school building that's built in Alabama after the 1st of August of 2012 has to have accommodation for safe rooms for all the inhabitants, enough to stand up to an F5 tornado, which is winds in excess of 250 miles an hour.
Students will be surrounded by a combination of steel and cement. The walls, ceiling, and doors will all be thicker. At least 600 people will be able to stand inside the safe rooms. The state of Alabama is reaching out and offering assistance to the state of Oklahoma today. Governor Robert Bentley says trained disaster recovery teams are being prepared, and he will deploy the Alabama National Guard if asked to do so. Alabama is no stranger to the devastation left by a tornado. As we said earlier, just 2 years ago, the state was rocked by one of the largest tornado outbreaks in the history of the U.S. 64 people were killed in the storm around Tuscaloosa, which caused $2.2 billion in damage. Governor Bentley released this statement today on the recovery. It's important for all of us to continue to pray for the people of Oklahoma and their leaders. We can identify with what the people of Oklahoma are going through. Our people understand what it means to comfort loved ones, to support survivors, and to help in the long-term recovery of communities. Tonight's team coverage of the deadly Oklahoma storms continues in our East Alabama newsroom with Elizabeth White. Elizabeth, Alabama went through a similar catastrophe on April 27, 2011 with a super outbreak of twisters.
Right. You know, you just talked about that, Cheryl. We actually showed video from that horrific outbreak just a few years ago. So like I said, Alabamians, they know exactly what these Oklahoma residents are going through tonight. And we all know America shines best when our neighbor needs help. And you guys at home, our viewers, you guys want to help. So tonight we have some expert advice from the experts on how you can make sure your gift is a blessing and not a burden.
The images are gut-wrenching. The loss of life, heartbreaking. America has always shined brightest when our neighbors are in need.
We are, by human nature, givers, and we want to help, and we want to make everything all better.
Rita Smith speaks for the majority of emergency management experts when she says a monetary donation to a reputable agency is the best way to help families overcome a disaster.
That's what we need most, because as I mentioned, we have purchased en masse all of our supplies long before the disaster ever happens.
The Red Cross is already in Oklahoma, providing food and shelter to victims and first responders, caring for their health and personal needs. Experts say this is not a time to clean out your closet and donate used items.
If you can only give $10, that's so much more valuable than loading up everything you've been needing to get rid of anyway and putting that burden on someone to stand and have to sort it and go through it.
And even brand new items can be problematic.
Logistically, it is just a really difficult thing to get items, first of all, even delivered to Oklahoma, and then the distribution is another nightmare that you'd be bringing into an already very chaotic area.
Finally, unless you are a trained volunteer called to serve, experts ask you please stay home.
And when you just pull up with a truckload of stuff, or you just pull up with people to help, you become part of the problem.
Bottom line, Oklahoma is hurting and needs our support. So give wisely of your money and freely of your thoughts and prayers.
Now you can support the response and recovery effort happening right now in Oklahoma by texting Red Cross to 90999 to give a $10 donation. You can also make a donation to the Red Cross by visiting their website, redcross.org. United Way, the Salvation Army, also fantastic organizations to donate your money to, tax-deductible donations, as well as the Tulsa Community Foundation. That website is also on your screen. Reporting in East Alabama, Elizabeth White, WTVM News Leader 9.
All right, great information. Thank you, Liz. Still to come on the news at 5:30, a family living in fear because they say one of their tenants' relatives is dangerous. We'll explain coming up. And here are some of the pictures out of Oklahoma where people are still reeling from the devastation. We'll be right back.